towards reconciliation and acknowledging them a dead issue. And I changed my will the next day. I've spent the last 30 plus years building a recognized, respectable name, and ironically, there are still people out there who are trying to smear my name while still carrying it, hoping to use it for their own benefit. I make absolutely no apologies for naming my infant son Brian. I want him and the world to know that he is the one who is my true legacy.
What it is, ho, what's up?
Brian Mcknight has been the silent legend for years. He has dropped beautiful songs that will stand the test of time. His legacy has been inserted into every marriage, school dance, anniversary, and loving moment. But how could a man who makes loving music destroy his own legacy by not showing that same love to his children? His treatment of his children has been the crippling testament to a falling legacy, and how the new generation views him as a person, not separating the person from the artist. Brian feels used while his children don't feel loved. What is really happening behind the scenes has been damaging on Brian's career. Him going out his way to call all his past children the product of sin is seen as absolutely deplorable and heartless. But is he the bad guy entirely? Is Brian reacting to everything that is happening to him and in turn just wanting to start over? Or is this another case of a deadbeat father the black community is tired of seeing, erasing his old children to uplift his new children? This is a longevity video on Brian Mcknight, destroying his legacy trying to create a new one. Brian, like many R&B singers from the 90s, started off in the church, singing in the church's choir, discovering his own talent for music. By 19, he signed his first record deal with Mercury Records. Before he dropped his first album, he was with Julie, who was his college sweetheart. She had gotten pregnant and he was under the assumption that she wasn't going to keep the baby, but she decided to have the baby anyways and he decided to marry her. They welcomed Brian Mcknight Jr., the first junior at the bunch, then welcomed the second child, Nico. Brian's self-titled album, Brian Mcknight, was released in 1992 and peaked at number 58. His first debut single was The Way Love Goes, which peaked at number 11 on Billboard. His second single, One Last Cry, was his highest charting single from the album. Brian ended up dropping 2 more albums for Mercury before he decided to part ways. The albums titled I Remember You, which was in 1995, and Anytime, which was in 1997. Both had chart-topping singles that really started showing Brian as a smooth R&B artist. For the album I Remember You, Brian tried to not overdo it on that album, telling Billboard that a lot of the vocals were first takes and that he didn't try to make it perfect. The music was a lot more looser to it and it wasn't as serious to him. Brian chose from 50 songs that he had recorded, and once he narrowed it down, he sequenced the album in 3 basic parts, with 4 or 5 singles selected for their commercial appeal for urban audiences, and the next 3 or 4 for what he called his pop suite, and the last few songs which he considered his most personal and most spiritual. Even though Brian really didn't try as hard for this album, it became his first album to enter the top 5, reaching number 4, having singles Down Low and Still in Love.
Nobody has to know, keep it on the down low. She said, nobody's still in love with you.
Brian's third and final album for Mercury, Anytime, was a massive success. This album he felt pressured to do better than his last. I Remember You sold good numbers. It sold 500,000 copies, but that was still considered a disappointment. But then again, he didn't try for that last album, which is considered weird because why would you not try for I Remember You then go hard for Anytime? He must have been unhappy with his contract, but either way, this time he wanted to take a different route and work with new producers to incorporate a hip-hop and R&B sound instead of the jazz influences, working with a few new producers like P. Diddy and Keith Thomas. His lead single, You Should Be Mine, became his biggest single at the time. The song featured Mace, who was one of the biggest rappers in the late 90s. It became the most played song on the radio in 1998. His other singles, Only One For Me and Hold Me, were also successful.
I just want to hold you for a while. Okay.
Brian has one of the most distinctive, smoothest R&B voices ever. It's really soft and sultry, and he became recognized more for his voice later on. He was even appointed by Disney in 1997 to record Remember the Magic for the Walt Disney 25th anniversary.
Oh, my shattered dreams and broken heart. I'm ending on the shelf.
Eventually, Brian signed a new contract with Motown in 1998, and his first release was a Christmas album called Bethlehem. In 1999, Brian released Back at One, his most successful album to date, which eventually went on to sell over 3 million copies. The album was damn near perfect, peak Brian. Even though he has had a lot of success, this is still one of the most memorable moments in his career.
It's undeniable.
His transition from soul and jazz to hip-hop and R&B rhythmic sounds proved to be a great choice for Brian. Because of the success from his album Anytime, his album Back at One was a great successor with that type of sound. Working with top producers like Rodney Jerkins, the album reached number 2 in the US and got nominations for the Grammy Awards and the Soul Train Music Awards. He had good charting singles like Back at One and 6812.
You're like a dream come true. Just wanna be with you. It's been 6 months, 8 days, 12 hours since you've been away.
As the 90s was coming to a close, not only was Brian making a name for himself as an R&B superstar, but he was also guest starring in a ton of black TV shows. In other words, he was legitimately everywhere in the 90s. He was featured in Martin, Living Single, Sister Sister, all the top black shows, and even shows like Beverly Hills 90210.
Never come a day you'll ever hear me say that I want to someone else. Now I sit all alone, wishing all my feeling was gone.
So, would you like to dance?
I gave my best.
I'd love to.
you. Nothing for me to do.
Through the 2000s, he has maintained his appearance. You never hear about drama with him, and to us, the fans, he always presented himself as a wholesome guy. Along the way, he had an affair and had a baby with Patricia Driver, conceiving a daughter named Brianna. He also conceived another daughter by another woman who isn't in the limelight as much. In 2001 and 2003, he dropped 2 albums. Superhero had a few singles that had Grammy nominations, with the singles Love of My Life and Still. His 7th album, U-Turn, debuted at number 7 on US Billboard 200. In addition, it also reached number 4 on the top R&B and hip-hop albums, and was eventually certified gold with Shoulda Woulda Coulda, entered the top 40 on the Billboard's Hot R&B charts, and received a Grammy Award nomination. Later on, he eventually divorced his first wife, Julie. I would say this is the beginning where we saw a pattern within Brian and how he expressed his new devotion for the new people in his life. In interviews, he started openly talking about how getting married in his 20s was one of the biggest mistakes he could have made.
A lot of things for marriage. 1, no one should get married at 20. Let's start there. 2, when you decide to make a commitment to someone, make sure that that person has everything you want.
Gemini is the 8th studio album and is Brian's last album on Motown Records. The album, released in 2005, debuted at number 4 on Billboard 200. This album taking the spot as Brian's highest charting album to date. Gemini had 2 leading singles, Every Time You Go Away and What We Do Here. His next album under Warner Bros. Was called 10. He worked with Tyler Perry during this period. He created a single called Find Myself in You for the movie Medea's Family Reunion. Brian releases projects like no other. Every other year he drops an album. His music is his passion and his livelihood to the core. By this time, he started pivoting away and doing hosting gigs like his morning radio show and Celebrity Apprentice. He of course has continued to drop albums, but his legacy has really been cemented by his work in the 90s and early 2000s. Because Brian is more of a quiet celebrity, especially with how he performs, most people don't recognize him outside of his music. He doesn't cause drama or bring attention to himself outside of singing, and that is also how he introduced his sons to his audience. Brian being an artist, he really tried to help his two eldest sons break into the music industry. He helped them executive produce their albums and even took them on tour with him for years to show them the ins and outs of touring and even let them sing and promote themselves.
It's been 6 months, 8 days, 12 hours since you went away.
Dad is an icon in the music business. What kind of advice does he give you before a big night like this?
Go out, show them what we're made of. Pretty much, yeah.
They formed a group together called the Broken Robots, and they really tried to get their name out there, and they were able to have a few songs blow up.
Yeah, I can really go. Okay. It really is the only thing that I brag about. Most people don't really know that I even do music until recently because I'm kind of soft-spoken about it, but you step on the court with me, you'll know exactly who
I've actually seen you do background for your father.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we toured for almost 7 or 8 years. You know, we went everywhere. We got to do the anthem at a couple special occasions, and that was really prolific for us. But, yeah, we were always either singing background or kicking them off stage and doing our own thing.
Yeah. I actually saw you and I think your brother doing a song together.
Oh, yeah.
So is like, will you all be a duet like Casey and JoJo, or?
Oh, without a doubt. I call this the new Outcast all the time. You know, he's an incredible singer, songwriter, guitar player, savant himself. And we are actually a rock band as well. We go by Broken Robots, and the brunt of our success has really come from that overseas. You know, we were fortunate enough to have a few songs really get out there and make it. And we're definitely going to be putting that back out there very soon, so I'm excited about that.
But those songs still weren't enough to make a name for themselves. Not only did they have the help of their father, but their mother is also a singer who has had success in house music. So the two sons had resources around them to help their journey. They toured with their dad for 7 years, from teenagers till their 20s, so it's not like they didn't have the blueprint to grow. In 2017, Brian married Leilani Mendoza. Brian himself has admitted that when he got married to Leilani, things began to get worse with his biological kids. But who exactly is to blame for this? A lot of things transpired between him and his children, starting with his sons. Brian was in his son's life. He did help them to an extent in their musical career. Did he also throw money at them? Yeah, but he also tried to get them jobs.
30 and 27. Not 12, not 13, but 30 and 27. Now my daughter's about to turn 18. That's another story I'll get to in a second. I've never missed a day of child support. I've never done anything adverse to my children whatsoever. I've always been there. I've always been there with advice, whether they took it or not. I've always been the sounding board, and I've always been the one that tried to help them achieve whatever dreams they were wanting to reach out for. I guess one of my only faults is I gave my children everything that I didn't have in the hopes that they would appreciate it, because I know how much I would have appreciated it when I was their age. I would tell you as parents out there, entitling your children is probably one of the worst things you can do, and I know I am guilty of that. For whatever reasons, I'm guilty of that. Tough love is a tough thing as a parent to try to institute to your children, because you want to help them as much as you can, and I did as much as I possibly could. When I stopped doing that for them, BJ was 25 and Nico was 22. And it wasn't like I completely cut them off at that point. That happened much later. But I've been there. When I put them out of my house, I gave them an apartment for 2 years. And I said, guys, this is it. This is the time to grow up. I'm giving you 2 years. I'm going to pay for everything for 2 years, but you're going to have to work or do something, because at the end of those 2 years, that's going to be it. It's time to be men here, guys. It's time to grow up. At the end of those 2 years, they hadn't done any of it. It was just right around the time that Leilani and I had gotten together. Leilani was working at Children's Hospital. And let's be clear, Leilani has been one of the only people who's been an advocate to keeping us together, to keeping us having a relationship, because she wants to have the nuclear family as much as I did. And they have spit in her face at every turn. She got them jobs at the hospital, $18 an hour with benefits, and with the option of the hospital actually paying for them to go back to school. They said, and I quote, that they knew they didn't want to stop smoking, and they would have to pass a drug test. And the day I had the doctors looking into it, Nico's on there, you know, taking a big puff, which is fine. If you want to smoke, that's fine. I'm not saying that that's bad. If that's your choice, that's your choice. But what I'm telling you is that we have been advocates for them every step of the way.
He did help by paying their rent for 2 years as they tried to get back on their feet. He did do all of that, but there's also something still missing. Brian Jr. admitted that he did pay child support, and Brian himself said that he never was late on payments. There does seem to be a disconnect on actually being a father versus just supporting them. Brian revealed that his son Brian Jr. had even broken into his home and vandalized a wedding photo of him and Leilani. He switched out a wedding photo and placed a wedding photo of his mother, Julie, and their dad on Leilani's vanity.
Now let's go to the part where we have been estranged. Again, we talk about abandonment. I'm not abandoning them. We are estranged, which happens more often than not in this particular situation. BJ broke into our home a few months ago, and he put X's on the eyes of our wedding photos. And then he put a photo of my first wedding on Leilani's vanity. It was at that moment, and after I heard him say, and was pointed to from other friends of mine that saw his posts on social media, that he basically said that I was better off dead to him than alive. I was more valuable to him dead than alive.
So this is kind of clear indication that things started to sour when Brian married Leilani. It could be because that's when there was a buildup to how he was treating his sons. Whether or not he gave them money or put a halt to their finances, they stick by the story that he wasn't a father to them. We have to take notice of their actions. Breaking into his house and changing the pictures to Brian and their mother, Julie, it's a clear sign that something is deeper there. Brian has made a clear indication. He made a post about his stepson, Jack, where he praised him for getting a job at McDonald's to help pay for the brand new car that he had got him, telling the world that he appreciates his efforts to be a helping hand and not a freeloader. Brian's son responded and said that he was abandoned by his father even though they were on tour with him for 7 years. There's more to the story. Even though they were on tour with him, he doesn't feel like his father was there for him. I do think people can have more understandings between the dynamics of him and his sons, but the situation between his daughter is like a cherry on top to why his fans are looking at him sideways. His daughter came out and said that she goes through fits of depression because of the relationship with her dad, feeling like her dad never loved her and feeling like it was her fault. Patricia and Brian had an affair while still married to his then wife, Julie Mcknight. The situation between her mother and father was more so lustful and filled with motives. So according to Brian, she got pregnant for money and he accepted Brianna, but according to Brianna, he was never in her life the way he should have been. Her statement to the public about their relationship prompted Brian to reveal that Brianna had sexual relations with her cousin when she was a minor.
My daughter is concerned, her mother, if you look back at my Instagram, she was a part of this family too, with Jack and Julie and Leilani and myself. And unfortunately, along the way, a couple years ago, I got wind that there was an older cousin who was above 18 who was quite possibly having sex with her. So I called, as a father should, to the state office for children's affairs there in Arizona, and I never heard anything back. But the next thing that her mother did was to block all of us from her social media, from her phone, and completely estranged her from us. So what that told me was they didn't want me to be involved in her life that way. So to see the post that she said, considering that her mother only had a child with me for money in the first place, and I'll reiterate this, I have not missed a child support payment. She goes to one of the most incredible private schools in Arizona. So I don't know where this is all coming from, but I thought...
In 2020, Brianna actually sued him because of these statements, openly telling social media that allegedly his daughter had inappropriate relations with their cousin is absolutely embarrassing, and adds further divide to the relationship.
In 2020, my biological daughter Brianna sued me for defamation and breach of contract. I posted a page from the lawsuit here and the file number down below, so you can look this up for yourself. And you will see that she did not ask for an apology or even ask that I remove the alleged false statement from the internet. All she asked for and all she wanted was money. The case was dismissed before there was any decision whether my statement about her was defamatory. We settled the case earlier this year, and I agreed to pay Brianna some money, but here's the interesting part. She sued me for defamation and breach of $1 million life insurance policy, and I agreed to pay her $318,000 with no admission of any wrongdoing whatsoever. You heard that right. She dismissed a $1 million case in exchange for payment of $318,000 with no admission that I did anything wrong and no requirement that I retract my statement or remove it from the internet. If someone said that I did something I didn't do and I won a case proving that I didn't, I demand a public apology. I demand an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. And I demand a retraction of statements. The face value of that life insurance policy was $300,000 with $18,000 worth of interest. I did not defame her. I made no false statements. I made up no stories. You can do what you will with that information in deciding who you think won the case.
They eventually settled, but it definitely didn't help. Brian is petty and has thrown subliminal shots at his children in the pettiest ways, just to show his kids he no longer cares for them and has accepted his stepchildren as his new children. He posts all their names in his bio. He makes long Instagram posts about his new kids are his true loves. He throws shots at his daughter using his stepdaughter, proclaiming that he's finally happy to be a girl dad and how proud he is to finally have a perfect daughter. Brian does a lot to affirm that he no longer wants anything to do with his biological children, and it's only gotten worse. But none of this is actually new. He's done it to his wife. He did it to his ex-wife when he publicly said that he's never been in love ever in his life, and that meeting Leilani was the first time that he's ever felt true love, and that all the love songs he wrote in the past was about feelings that he saw from other people, never about the feelings of his own.
What would you say, or who has inspired the lovemaking songs for you the most?
I will say this, my wife, because I never wrote a song about anyone until her. Which is crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Because I've been writing, I've known her 7 years, but I've been writing love songs since I was 14.
Right.
But if you listen to Anytime or Back at One, they're very on the surface.
Right.
They're very moment in time feelings. I never wrote about forever till her. I never wrote about the rest of my life until her.
Oh, that's powerful.
And because I never felt that way. I didn't think it existed, to be honest with you, because I didn't know anybody that had it like that, and I'd never felt it.
What?
So surely it didn't really exist. But once I met her, and once we got to know one another and we did things the traditional way, I started to feel like I finally found someone that I didn't want to live with. I couldn't live without.
Oh my gosh.
And that's what's happened in the last 7 years. I have not written one sad song. I haven't written one song that didn't have anything to do with her. She's in 5 of my videos. She's my only love interest. She's the only person that...
So Brian has a pattern of subliminal passive aggressiveness. He publicly professes his love for one thing while also denouncing subliminally his past situations. So when he announced that his new son is Brian Mcknight Jr. and telling the world that you took your biological kids out of your will, he again is showing this passive aggressive nature.
Brian Mcknight strikes again. This time he has changed his name to match his new son. You know, the one that he named Brian Mcknight Jr. when he already had a Brian Mcknight Jr.? So apparently Brian Mcknight has a new album out, Lullabies, for his new son. And he made this announcement along with the announcement that he also changed his name legally. So Brian posted this album cover along with this caption. He says, "So proud to introduce our son, Brian Kanoa Makoa Jr. to the world with the release of my new album, lovingly created for him." He says, "Junior, because I am also proud to officially announce that I have legally changed my name to exactly match my legacies." He says, "My legal name is now Brian Kanoa Makoa Mcknight Sr." He says, "Mcknight Time Lullabies, the songs of a father to his namesake, available now." So Brian Mcknight Jr., his son, is now speaking out in regards to possibly changing his own name. So this commenter says, "I feel so bad, and if I was Brian Mcknight Jr., I'd change my effing name. What a corny ass man, shaking my effing head. I'd be so upset to at all be attached." Brian Mcknight Jr. responds and says, "I'm not ashamed of the name my ancestors had. I'll never change the name my son now has. We are witnessing an obscene level of self-hate that has reached mental illness status at this point. All we can do is pray for that man and my new little brother, who we will all welcome with open arms one day once he realizes who his real family is. Legacy isn't in the name, it's in the character of the people. It will all be quite clear soon just who's on the right side of all of this, because there's no escaping what's coming." I mean, he's pretty right, because all of these little trigger words that Brian Mcknight is saying in his post about namesake and legacy, he knows exactly what he's doing and who he's addressing.
Towards reconciliation and acknowledging them a dead issue. and I changed my will the next day. I've spent the last 30 plus years building a recognized, respectable name, and ironically, there are still people out there who are trying to smear my name while still carrying it, hoping to use it for their own benefit. I make absolutely no apologies for naming my infant son Brian. I want him and the world to know that he is the one who is my true legacy.
It's one thing to tell your kids they are taken out of the will, but to tell the world that your stepchildren will reap the rewards of your career, but not your biological children is very, very petty. He is openly going out his way to hurt his children's feelings. Regardless of what is happening, he's publicly holding his stepchildren to a higher pedestal while abandoning his biological children, further driving a wedge with the relationship with his stepchildren and biological kids. He even went as far as to legally change his name. He legally changed his name to leaving his old one behind. And the saga continues as he's called his bio children the product of sin.
So lastly this week, I want to big up my man right here. See, he gets it. In order to live a life that you love, you have to get rid of the evil and the negativity, even if that evil and negativity is related. We want everyone to live a life that you love. Our hashtag, that's what it means. Hashtag I live our life. But in order to do that, you have to get rid of all that evil and negativity. There's so many angry and upset and negative people out there. We want to use our platform as a place of positivity, a positivity platform. So hopefully, who knows, next week, maybe I'll only respond to positive comments. But we'll see. We'll see you next week.
It's very interesting to see a man go through his entire career with a clean image. He has prided himself on his career just to tarnish it all by himself. The relationship with his stepchildren and wife is great. It's amazing to see him take her kids as his own, but it's extremely disheartening to see him throw away his biological kids, then parade around his new kids as this new legacy. He is going out his way to advertently remind his kids that they are no longer a part of his legacy, in turn destroying his own legacy. From everything he has accomplished and maintained, his image is getting overridden by his own incessant need to reject his true legacy. Well, that concludes today's video, guys. Let me know what you guys think about Brian Mcknight down below in the comments, and make sure you like and subscribe. Toodles!